It's a gray morning in the Pacific Northwest. A steady drizzle paints the streets, and a neon, open, sign flickers in the window of a quiet small-town bank. Inside, tellers sip coffee and count bills, just another day in 1987. But in a few minutes, this ordinary morning will become the first chapter in one of America's most elusive true crime mysteries. Before we dive in, subscribe to this channel and stay tuned, because we're uncovering the story of the Cowboy Bandit, a man who robbed banks with the calm of a gentleman, vanished without a trace, and left behind nothing but questions and legend. The late 1980s. The era of analog everything, cassette tapes, rotary phones, and shoulder pads. Security systems were primitive, bank alarms were slow, and surveillance cameras captured footage so grainy it looked like ghosts moving through fog. Washington State, 1987. A quiet economy built on timber and trade. Banks were modest, tucked between grocery stores and gas stations. People knew their tellers by name. And somewhere, in this world of routine and trust, a man was planning something remarkable. Not reckless, not violent, but deliberate. He wasn't the kind of criminal who lived in chaos. He was methodical, reserved, and eerily professional. He was about to earn a name that would echo through law enforcement circles for nearly a decade. November 1987. A small branch of a regional bank in Spokane opens its doors at 9 a.m. The tellers prepare their drawers, the manager sorts mail. Everything is calm. At 9:07, the glass door opens. In walks a man dressed too sharply for a weekday morning. He wears a dark suit, neatly pressed. His tie is conservative. No flash, no arrogance. But the detail that catches every eye, cowboy boots. Polished to a mirror shine. He moves slowly, like someone with all the time in the world. The teller smiles, assuming he's another customer. He doesn't smile back. Instead, he slides a folded note across the counter. The teller reads it. Her pulse spikes. The note is short, typed, and terrifyingly calm. This is a robbery. Put the money in the bag. No one gets hurt. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't brandish a weapon. He just stands there, steady, composed, waiting. The teller obeys, hands trembling as she fills a small bag with cash. The man nods politely, takes it, and walks out. No panic. No alarms. No getaway car scene. By the time police arrive, he's gone. What he leaves behind is confusion, and a single, unforgettable image burned into everyone's mind: the boots. The man in cowboy boots who robbed a bank and vanished into the rain. The headlines the next morning read like something out of a movie. Bank robber in cowboy boots strikes in Spokane. Gentleman bandit leaves police puzzled. The nickname sticks, the Cowboy Bandit. Reporters can't get enough of him. The image sells papers. A mysterious outlaw in boots, calm as a preacher, robbing banks like it's the Wild West reborn. But law enforcement isn't amused. The FBI is called in. Agents watch the security tape again and again. A man walks in. A man walks out. His face angled just enough to blur in the camera's static haze. No fingerprints. No footprints. No dye pack explosion. No car identified. Whoever he was, he'd planned it perfectly. Agents start comparing the robbery to others across the state. Could it be a one-time event? A copycat? Or the beginning of something bigger? The lead investigator describes it as surgical. Everything, the timing, the note, even the demeanor, suggests training. Maybe law enforcement. Maybe military. The FBI begins to suspect they're dealing with someone who knows the system from the inside. Still, they can't find a single identifying mark. Witnesses describe him differently. Brown hair, maybe blonde, maybe dark. Clean-shaven, or maybe a light beard. Even his height varies depending on who you ask. He's a phantom. And phantoms don't make mistakes. The story spreads fast. People in towns across Washington begin watching bank entrances, half expecting the Cowboy Bandit to stroll through their doors. He becomes a strange kind of folk figure. Some admire his calmness, others fear his unpredictability. He never hurt anyone. He never fired a shot. But his confidence unsettled everyone. For law enforcement, that was the scariest part. Criminals who act on impulse are easier to catch. But those who act with control, those are the ones who vanish. Weeks pass. Then months. And just when the case starts to cool, it happens again. Another small-town bank. Another calm robbery. Same note, same quiet voice, same boots. But this time, he's more efficient, less time inside, cleaner escape. The FBI now confirms it. The Cowboy Bandit is active. He's studying each hit, refining his technique like a craftsman perfecting his work. Investigators notice something chilling. He seems to target banks near major highways, always with quick exits. He never steals excessively large amounts, just enough to avoid raising immediate alarms. To them, it looks less like greed and more like practice. Each robbery is a rehearsal for something bigger. A sheriff stands before reporters. "We believe the suspect is highly intelligent, possibly trained. He's calm, calculated, and methodical." The questions fly. "Do you think he's from Washington? Is he armed? Is he dangerous?" The sheriff hesitates before answering. "Dangerous? Maybe not in the way you think. But yes, he's dangerous, because he's good." Meanwhile, FBI agents work overtime connecting the dots. But every trail leads to a dead end. The Cowboy Bandit leaves no trace. He doesn't brag, doesn't spend lavishly, doesn't slip up. He just disappears, again and again. What made him different wasn't just the boots. It was the way he carried himself. Witnesses say he was polite. He thanked tellers after taking the money. Some even said he looked regretful, almost apologetic. It wasn't the behavior of a desperate man. It was the confidence of someone in complete control. He wasn't robbing for attention or adrenaline. He was executing a plan. A plan no one could quite understand. And as investigators would soon realize, the Cowboy Bandit wasn't slowing down. He was just getting started. Every detective who touched the case came away haunted by the same question. Who was he really? Was he a former soldier? A disillusioned banker? An undercover cop gone rogue? Each theory felt possible, and yet none fit perfectly. By the end of 1987, the Cowboy Bandit wasn't just a criminal, he was a legend in the making. Banks upgraded their alarms. Tellers were trained to spot unusual footwear. The FBI created a dedicated task force. And yet the man himself? Untouched. Unseen. Each robbery added to his myth. The boots. The composure. The vanishing act. He turned crime into performance, clean, fast, unforgettable. In a decade defined by excess and noise, the Cowboy Bandit was pure silence. No chaos. No signature violence. Just quiet confidence, and the sound of boots on tile before disappearing into the world again. In time, his legend would stretch across state lines, from Washington to Arizona, inspiring copycats, captivating reporters, and taunting detectives who never found a name, a face, or a motive. But every legend starts somewhere. And his began with that first quiet walk into a small-town bank on a rainy Washington morning. A man. A note. A pair of cowboy boots. And a mystery that still hasn't been solved. It starts again. A quiet morning, a small-town bank, and a man in cowboy boots who walks in calm, and walks out richer. But this time, he's not just a ghost in Washington. He's moving, fast, and the trail he leaves behind will stretch nearly a decade and across hundreds of miles. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned as we trace the Cowboy Bandit's unstoppable spree, the years when a single man outwitted banks, baffled investigators, and became a modern outlaw legend. It's 1988, a year after his first robbery. Most people think he's long gone, just another mystery lost to time. But they're wrong. On a crisp spring morning in Yakima, Washington, a bank opens its doors to routine. Customers line up. The usual rhythm begins. At 9:15, the Cowboy Bandit strikes again. Same precision. Same confidence. Same boots. He walks in with the calm of a businessman. Hands a note. Waits. Leaves. No fingerprints. No vehicle description. Just silence and confusion. The police arrive minutes later, again too late. One detective mutters, "He's back." And with that, the Cowboy Bandit's second act begins. From 1988 through 1990, the Cowboy Bandit begins to move like clockwork. Small banks. Off-highway locations. Always mid-morning, always calm. The timeline stretches: Spokane, Kennewick, Walla Walla, Yakima. Each heist is clean, controlled, and eerily similar. By now, the FBI knows his signature. Type note: cowboy-booted.no shouting, "No weapons displayed." Disappears before anyone even calls 911. To local cops, he's a ghost. To the media, he's a sensation. Headlines spread like wildfire. The Cowboy Bandit strikes again. FBI tracks polite bank robber with Western flair. He becomes a character in America's criminal folklore, a strange blend of modern thief and old-school gentleman outlaw. But the more famous he gets, the smarter he becomes. He changes patterns, crosses state lines, and expands his hunting ground. The trail leads south, toward Arizona. By the early 90s, the Cowboy Bandit shifts operations. Arizona, a new landscape, new banks, same method. He strikes in Phoenix, Mesa, Tucson. Each time, the story is identical. Calm. Controlled. Gone. The desert heat doesn't slow him down. If anything, it fuels his legend. Witnesses report the same thing every time. He didn't look nervous. He was polite, like he'd done it 1,000 times. He didn't even run. The FBI starts to believe he's scouting his targets weeks in advance, timing cameras, memorizing routines, calculating exits. This isn't chance. This is choreography. Every time the Cowboy Bandit strikes, he evolves. He stops wearing the same suit every job. Sometimes it's gray, sometimes navy. He starts using hats to obscure his face, sometimes sunglasses. He switches vehicles, rental cars, stolen plates, local models that blend in. He changes his walking gait slightly in each video, making it impossible to confirm if it's the same man. But there's one constant: the boots. Always clean, polished, unmistakably Western. Those boots become his signature, his calling card, his myth. The FBI gives his case a code name: Cowboy Series. Agents from Washington and Arizona start working together. Dozens of investigators, hundreds of hours of footage, zero progress. Each robbery leaves the same result: money gone, suspect gone, no trail. Teller says, "He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone you'd trust with your money." Bank manager says, "He didn't yell. Didn't threaten. Just said, 'Please don't do anything foolish. This will be over soon.' I'll never forget that." Local sheriff says, "It's the confidence that threw people off. He moved like he'd done this before, maybe in another life." Every detail matters. His posture, his voice, his timing. And as law enforcement digs deeper, a terrifying realization sets in. He's learning from every single job. No two robberies are exactly the same. Each one refines the last. He adjusts routes, disguises, and getaway timing with uncanny precision. This isn't random crime. It's strategy. By 1993, the FBI has profiled him extensively. Age, mid-30s to early 40s. Background, possibly military, possibly law enforcement. Motivation, unknown. But they can't pin him down. Even as the robberies mount, the Cowboy Bandit stays invisible. He's methodical enough to never trigger alarms too early. Smart enough to avoid banks with dye packs or GPS trackers. Careful enough to never spend marked cash locally. Every time investigators think they have a lead, it evaporates. One agent later said, "It was like chasing smoke. He was always one step ahead." By the mid-90s, the Cowboy Bandit isn't just a criminal, he's a cultural phenomenon. Newspapers run feature stories about him. Radio hosts debate who he might be. And the public, strangely, admires him. He's calm, clean, and, most importantly, nonviolent. In a decade filled with chaos and crime sprees, his composure sets him apart. People start comparing him to old Hollywood figures, Butch Cassidy, Jesse James, even Danny Ocean. But behind the headlines, the FBI isn't smiling. Because admiration turns into interference, false tips, hoaxes, and wannabe copycats start to flood in. And the real Cowboy Bandit? He's watching from somewhere, probably amused. Investigators notice something subtle. His robberies aren't random at all. They're grouped around seasons, times, and routes, like a man who moves for work, or maybe travels for another reason. Each cluster of crimes follows a similar geographic rhythm: 3 in Washington, then silence. Months later, 2 in Arizona, then quiet again. He's moving with purpose. Maybe even holding a regular job between robberies. Some agents begin to suspect he's hiding in plain sight, someone ordinary, someone invisible in a crowd. From his first robbery in 1987 to his last confirmed hit in 1996, the Cowboy Bandit racks up a staggering number of successful heists. Estimates vary, some say 8, others claim 12 or more. Each one as clean as the first. 9 years. 2 states. No arrests. No confirmed suspects. By 96, investigators begin to wonder, has he stopped? Or has he simply changed identities again? Some think he retired. Others believe he died. A few are convinced he's still out there, quietly living under a new name. Whatever the truth, the Cowboy Bandit leaves a trail of empty vaults and unanswered questions. By the time the FBI closes its primary file in the late 90s, the Cowboy Bandit has achieved something no one expected: he got away clean. The case remains open but cold. Detectives retire. Evidence sits in boxes. VHS tapes fade to static. And the myth takes over. The Cowboy Bandit becomes a symbol of something larger: an outlaw who refused to play by modern rules, a ghost who walked through security systems and bureaucracy as easily as he walked out of a bank. For nearly 10 years, one man traveled from rainy Washington streets to the burning deserts of Arizona, calm, polite, untraceable. He didn't fit the mold of a criminal. He was smarter, sharper, colder. His methods changed. His disguises evolved. But his spirit never wavered. He was always the man in cowboy boots, walking calmly into history. The FBI never found him. The media never identified him. And maybe that's why the story still lingers. Because in a world of technology and surveillance, he beat the system. He rode in, took what he wanted, and vanished. In our next chapter, Part 3, Behind the Mask, we'll dive into the theories, suspects, and strange possibilities behind who the Cowboy Bandit might have been. He was calm, polite, precise. He walked into banks like he owned them, vanished without panic, and left the FBI chasing shadows for nearly a decade. By 1996, the Cowboy Bandit had pulled off one of the most remarkable crime sprees in American history, and then disappeared forever. But who was he? A professional thief? A family man with a secret life? A ghost who simply stepped out of history? The investigation had grown into an obsession. By 1992, agents from Washington, Arizona, and the FBI's Western Division were working full-time to track the Cowboy Bandit's identity. The board of suspects was a gallery of faces: truck drivers, ex-cops, loan officers, drifters, even a retired military pilot. Every lead promised clarity. Every lead collapsed into nothing. What made him so hard to find wasn't just his disguise, it was his ordinariness. He wasn't flashy. Didn't draw attention. Didn't fit any one criminal profile. He was the kind of man you'd pass in line at a coffee shop and never remember again. That was his weapon: invisibility through normalcy. Every time he robs a bank, he does it cleaner, quieter. He doesn't make mistakes. So either we're dealing with a career professional, or a ghost. In one of the FBI's Joint Task Force meetings, analysts reviewed over 1,000 pages of data, license plates, witness statements, handwriting comparisons. Still, nothing. One investigator suggested he might have been a law enforcement officer himself. Someone who knew how to handle an investigation from the inside. He avoided alarms, bypassed security, and never stayed long enough to trigger a silent alert. Those are the actions of someone trained in observation, timing, and control. Could the Cowboy Bandit have once worn a badge? The first major theory pointed to a former Washington state trooper who had gone missing in the late 80s. He matched the height, the posture, even the calm demeanor described by witnesses. For months, agents tailed the man, tracked his financials, and questioned his associates. But there was a problem. No evidence tied him to any of the robberies. His handwriting didn't match. His timeline didn't fit. And when investigators finally located him, living quietly under a new identity, he was clean. No trace of the stolen cash. No reason to suspect him beyond coincidence. He was ruled out. The Cowboy Bandit remained at large. To understand the man behind the mask, the FBI's behavioral unit built a detailed profile. They described him as highly organized, risk-tolerant, and disciplined, but not sadistic or impulsive. Unlike most robbers, he wasn't motivated by rage or addiction. He wasn't desperate. He was deliberate. The profile noted his professional composure under pressure and his minimal verbal interaction with victims. He planned robberies like operations, not crimes of passion. Agents began to see him less as a thief and more as a strategist, someone who enjoyed outsmarting systems. They compared him to white-collar criminals who use intellect and timing instead of brute force. A line in the report summed it up perfectly. This subject does not crave violence. He craves control. The next theory was equally compelling. Several agents believed the Cowboy Bandit might have been a veteran, possibly special forces. The reasoning was simple: precision, discipline, and exit strategy. He knew how to read terrain, spot blind spots, and maintain composure. And unlike amateurs, he seemed comfortable under pressure, completely calm during a high-stakes crime. But when investigators compared his methods to known military fugitives, nothing matched. No fingerprints, no service records, no trail of veterans with unexplained wealth or travel patterns. Whoever he was, he'd covered his tracks better than anyone expected. What if the Cowboy Bandit wasn't a drifter or a rogue? What if he was a neighbor, a husband, a father, a man with a normal job who simply vanished on weekends? That possibility haunted agents the most. A double life. Someone who kissed his kids goodbye in the morning, then drove across state lines, robbed a bank, and returned home in time for dinner. The behavioral unit concluded that his low profile might have been his greatest disguise. No flashy spending, no sudden absences, no pattern that screamed criminal. To his community, he could have been anyone: a banker, a salesman, maybe even someone working inside the banking industry itself. The thought chilled investigators. If he was living a double life, they might never find him, because he wasn't hiding. He was blending in. Over 9 years, the Cowboy Bandit generated more than 200 leads. Each one seemed promising, until it wasn't. There was the man in Oregon who bragged about cleaning out banks at a bar. False. A security guard in Phoenix whose gait matched the robbers. Wrong. A Texas ex-con who claimed he knew the cowboy personally. Fabrication. Every lead ended in a dead end. The FBI began to wonder if he'd planned this from the start, if each robbery was spaced just far enough apart to erase his trail before they caught up. Every time the investigation closed in, he disappeared for months. Sometimes years. It was almost like he knew when they were watching. One of the most debated theories within the FBI was the insider hypothesis. What if the Cowboy Bandit worked inside the banking industry? It made sense. He knew procedures, when shifts changed, how security systems cycled, and when cash reserves were highest. Some investigators thought he could have been a former manager or teller, someone who'd memorized how the system worked before turning it against them. But again, no direct connection ever surfaced. They cross-referenced hundreds of former employees from affected branches. Nothing. No one matched the physical description, no one fit the timeline. And the bandit? Still gone. By the late 90s, the case had taken on a mythic quality. You couldn't find a single trace of him. No fingerprints. No DNA. No car. No cash recovery. Some agents began calling him the ghost. It wasn't official, but it captured the feeling they were chasing someone who might not even exist anymore. One retired agent later said, "Sometimes I wonder if he was a composite, multiple people copying each other. But the signature was too consistent. It felt like one mind behind it all." The ghost theory split investigators. Half believed he'd simply stopped, retired, maybe dead. The other half believed he was still out there, living quietly, waiting for everyone to forget. Criminal psychologists studying the case offered a fascinating perspective. They argued that the Cowboy Bandit didn't vanish out of fear. He vanished because he'd finished. He wasn't addicted to crime. He was addicted to control, and once he'd proved his mastery, there was no need to continue. He'd beaten the system. Outwitted the FBI. Outsmarted time. To someone like him, that might have been the real reward, not the money, but the perfect execution. He didn't disappear to hide. He disappeared because his story was complete. After 1996, the Cowboy Bandit case went cold. Every composite sketch, every theory, every file now sits boxed in archives, aging like a legend sealed in dust. The FBI has never closed the file officially, but years have passed with no trace, no confession, no slip. So, who was the Cowboy Bandit? A cop turned criminal? A soldier turned strategist? The truth might never be known. But one thing is certain, he shattered the illusion of security. He proved that with calm, patience, and discipline, a single man could outsmart the system for almost a decade, and then simply walk away. He walked in like always, calm, collected, unstoppable. And then, he was gone. No farewell, no trail, no trace. The Cowboy Bandit's final robbery in 1996 marked not just the end of a crime spree, it marked the moment a man stepped cleanly out of history. Today, we follow his last known appearance and uncover how one of America's most mysterious bank robbers vanished into legend. It was early April, 1996. A small-town branch of a regional bank in Spokane opened its doors to what seemed like another ordinary day. By noon, the line had thinned, and most employees were counting down the hours until closing. Then, at 12:47 p.m., a man stepped inside. A dark suit, a crisp white shirt, cowboy boots that clicked softly on the tile floor. Security cameras caught him from 3 angles. His movements were deliberate, every step choreographed, every glance measured. He carried no visible weapon. No mask. Just a small paper note and an aura of absolute calm. He approached the teller with the same politeness that had become his signature. The note read something simple, almost absurdly polite. "Put the money in the bag. No alarms. No one gets hurt." Witnesses said he even smiled. The teller complied. No one screamed. No one panicked. He collected the cash, an estimated $20,000, and turned, walking toward the exit with the same composure he'd entered with. Outside, a breeze kicked up dust along the parking lot. He stepped into a light-colored sedan. No license plate was recorded. And just like that, he disappeared. It was the last confirmed sighting of the Cowboy Bandit. For 9 years, his pattern had been almost mathematical. Hit a target. Disappear. Wait months, sometimes years, before striking again. Never in the same city twice. Never at the same time of day. But after that April robbery, everything stopped. The phone lines went quiet. No matching suspects surfaced. No new leads emerged. Agents expected another heist within 6 months. Then a year. Then 2. By 1998, the task force had to face an uncomfortable truth. The Cowboy Bandit was gone. The FBI held its final public briefing on the case in 1999. By then, the investigation had spanned 3 states, involved dozens of agents, and generated over 2,000 pages of evidence. The spokesperson's tone was calm but weary. "We have reason to believe the individual known as the Cowboy Bandit may have ceased activity or left the region. The case remains open." Behind the cameras, agents exchanged glances. It wasn't closure, it was surrender. For years, they had followed his boots through cities and small towns, tracking the same elegance, the same precision, the same absence of violence. And now, he was simply gone. Some called it retirement. Others whispered that he died. But deep down, most of them suspected something else. He had planned his own disappearance as carefully as every robbery before it. Some investigators believed the Cowboy Bandit simply decided to stop. He had earned enough to vanish comfortably, and after nearly a decade of precision crimes, perhaps he felt he'd proven his point. This theory paints him as a man of intellect and discipline, a strategist who treated robbery like an art form. He wasn't chasing money. He was chasing mastery. And when the art was perfected, he walked away. Another school of thought suggested that he wasn't an outlaw full-time. He could have been a family man, someone living quietly in suburban anonymity, his robberies conducted between business trips or commutes. This theory explains his calm, his control, his invisibility. A ghost story that ended not with capture, but with decay, one more unsolved mystery swallowed by time. In the end, the case boiled down to fragments. Fuzzy video frames. Eyewitness sketches. Typed reports from half a dozen banks. And one haunting symbol, the cowboy boots. Those boots became more than a disguise. They became an identity. A deliberate signature in a world of faceless crimes. They were confidence. They were style. They were a warning, this was no ordinary robber. Some agents even believed the boots weren't just part of his look, they were part of his message. Every robbery was a performance, and the boots were the costume. When he disappeared, the legend of those boots stayed behind, an empty symbol on a dusty stage, as if the man had walked off the edge of history. By the early 2000s, the FBI had quietly boxed up the Cowboy Bandit files. Dozens of agents had rotated off the task force, moving on to newer, louder crimes. The official statement remained unchanged. Case open, suspect unidentified. Unofficially, it was over. Reporters moved on. The public forgot. But among law enforcement circles, the Cowboy Bandit became a kind of folk legend. He wasn't remembered with anger, but with a strange respect. Because he'd done the impossible. He'd stolen from the system without violence, escaped without chaos, and disappeared without trace. In the age before digital footprints, he became proof that someone could still vanish completely. So how did he evade capture? In a world where criminals trip themselves up through arrogance or panic, he stayed calm, always one move ahead. Some investigators even speculated he might have studied criminology or law enforcement procedure, someone who knew the playbook so well he could rewrite it from the other side. Others think he understood psychology more than tactics. He knew that fear and control were better tools than guns or masks. That confidence disarmed people faster than violence ever could. That composure was the perfect camouflage. The Cowboy Bandit's disappearance marked more than the end of one man's story. It marked the end of an era. The mid-1990s were the last years before digital surveillance changed everything, before every street corner had cameras, before every transaction left a trace. He was one of the last outlaws to truly vanish. Today, it's nearly impossible to disappear like he did. Every GPS ping, every phone signal, every security camera ties us to a grid. But back then, a man with calm nerves and a steady plan could still slip into the cracks, and never be found again. That's part of why his legend endures. Because he reminds us of something both terrifying and fascinating, that for all our control, there was once a man who outsmarted the entire system with nothing but charm, patience, and cowboy boots. Over time, the Cowboy Bandit became a story told in whispers. He became a symbol of the perfect escape, the man who didn't just rob banks, but robbed the world of closure. His story sits between myth and memory. Maybe he's out there still, an old man with a quiet smile, sitting on a porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Or maybe he's gone, buried under a name no one ever connected. Either way, he won. He wrote his own ending, then sealed it shut. No confession. No arrest. No loose ends. Just the sound of boots walking away from history. And so the Cowboy Bandit rode off, not into the sunset, but into the unknown. A man who turned crime into choreography, and disappearance into art. Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's alive, watching from a distance, smiling at how the world still talks about him. Maybe he's the old man you passed in the grocery store, quiet, calm, still wearing boots that tell no story. Or maybe the Cowboy Bandit isn't a man at all anymore. Maybe he's become what every legend becomes, a reflection of what we long for: mystery, freedom, and the ability to slip the noose of visibility. Because in the end, the Cowboy Bandit isn't about crime. He's about escape. Not from banks. From the world itself. Every outlaw fades, but the Cowboy Bandit endures, because his greatest trick wasn't the robbery. It was convincing the world that some secrets are better left unsolved. Stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the shadows, where legend and truth ride side by side.